Just walk away. Just walk away, and there will be an end to the horror.
All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to MGTOW Chats. I am your host, Ayam Sirias, and as always, my co-host, Lamprey Milt, is here. And we have a special returning guest, Brian Martinez from the Honey Badgers. And today we're going to be talking a little bit on a topic that I've been kind of gnawing at the bit to discuss, but it's really hard to find people that can talk about it. I know Lamprey isn't too well versed on the subject, but believe me, Lamprey, I mean, it's not just about comics and movies and pop culture. We are going to talk about the culture wars, as Brian mentioned before we went live. I was kind of looking for the term to put in the title, and I just left it out. I didn't know if I wanted to say SJW or go woke.
Yeah, SJW or, fucking, so people call them cultural terrorists. You could do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're just psychos. I mean, just psychos, man.
Yeah, it's you said culture wars, also kind of like it's identity politics also.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, in the end, I mean, what's happening is that a lot of this pop culture media, which includes comics, is been under attack over the last, I don't know, how long would you say? Is it really started?
Oh, shit. I mean, I honestly believe that we only found out about it in maybe the last 6 years or so, when Gamergate happened. That's like when most people started to wake up to this thing. But I can guarantee you it's been going on a lot longer. It's just been like this slow sickness that's been growing inside of various facets of our pop culture. And it always basically the way I think it works is when a certain kind of creative medium, so that's what we're talking about, is art in different forms. When a certain kind of creative medium or artistic expression becomes very popular and mainstream, people that want to use it to push out propaganda, to chase after their political agendas, they want to save the world, they want to start revolutions, whatever, they start getting involved in that. And it eats away at it. It takes away the beauty of it. And so this has been going on. This is why I say it's been going on a lot longer. I've been watching, and I knew about this as I love movies. I love movies. Okay. I love watching them, especially because I grew up in the 80s, movies from the 80s that shaped, our popular culture and stuff that goes back to the 70s. I'm just really big into all different kinds. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you can see how film has changed in the last, say, 10 years or so, right? Oh, yeah. I think that is the product of that. However, I think that there's always been this, or at least ever since the 60s, there has been this ideological subversion going on inside of cinema. And the reason why was because cinema was so big. It was huge. Everyone, could go to movie theaters. People had televisions at home. They were able to, watch movies on TV and stuff. And I think that because it became so popular, there were people, and again, I know it sounds like a conspiracy theory. It's not something that should be dismissed. When artists want to create work that changes the world, and the way that I think they do it is they go and they try to use creative mediums. They use the arts to change hearts and minds, and it's very effective because people are moved by stories. It's one of the things that narratives are popular with human beings. So they did it in film. And if you want some really great evidence of this, there's a YouTube channel I'll recommend. Although I've been thinking about this a lot, just watching movies on my own. But there's a YouTube channel I will recommend. Have you guys ever heard of Black Pilled?
Yes.
Okay, so he does a lot of videos where he talks about film, and a lot of those films are very old. And he goes into, how what the narratives are and how they're subverting, and sort of subliminally, I would say, more accurately, I'd say subtly altering people's perceptions about reality. And it's been going on in a really subtle way. It's just that recently it's become a lot more overt because every generation of social justice warriors, and I'm saying this because I know that SJWs have existed going back to the 1960s, if not before. In fact, I would argue that it's been going on ever since we industrialized the West.
Oh yeah.
Because as soon as we were able to create, a system of free market capitalism where anybody could essentially build something and become someone, and it wasn't sort of like, done through someone who had divine right, like a king or a monarch or something along those lines. There have been people who have, and there have been people who have not, and the have-nots have always been trying to find a way to get at the people who have, and a resentment grows from that. But anyway, I'm getting off course here. I think that this has been going on for that long, and this is just a medium for them to do it. However, every generation that comes, SJWs become more impatient, more emotional, more reactionary, and more violent. And so they basically find they're in more of a hurry than the previous generation, where they're more willing to take their time, right?
Yeah.
So today, you got people getting involved in movies, comics, video games, music, just about every creative medium. Even like theater, and they're pushing out their politics, and they're not being subtle, and they're not hiding what their intentions are. They're just being as blatant as they can. They're being as woke and as loud as possible, and it's actually killing the creativity.
Yes.
It's killing what creativity remains.
Well, you can't really be creative if your intention is to force some kind of political agenda or cultural idea, if that's your motive before just creating a good story. You can't. It's impossible.
No.
Now, before we continue into it, I just want to make sure, okay, so Warrior's in. That's good. Warrior, good to see you. Logic Win says he'll be here after GOT, which I think is Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Game of Thrones is on right now.
Is it on right now? Do a lot of people watch that?
Well, I mean, I think so. I don't watch it.
I don't watch it either.
I'll tell you, and I know that, I know I'll get shit on for this because Game of Thrones is very popular with a lot of people. Right. But I saw the first season of Game of Thrones, and I was bored out of my mind. And the other thing is that I got the sense, because I knew people who were reading the books and stuff, and I was like, so the end of the first season, the most noble and likable and most sort of heroic character, who was also the patriarch of a certain of a clan, his name was Ned Stark, he gets killed. So he gets beheaded at the end of the season. And this is to set the tone, I think, for the rest of the show. And when they killed him off, and it was Sean Bean, so I think they actually brought Sean Bean to play the character because he had a lot of legitimacy that was brought with it, because the majority of people on the show were unknowns. Right. They were new to the whole thing, right? So he was there to bring legitimacy to it. And it almost you thought of Boromir from Lord of the Rings when you saw him. And then they kill him off, and that sets the tone for the rest of the show. So I was like, okay, so this show seems to be all about a fantasy that is not an adventure, and it's all about subverting your expectations. It's all about taking away what you normally would expect from the hero's journey. We're going to do the opposite of that. And so I just didn't have an interest. And plus, if I watch a show, I don't watch a lot of shows because I don't have a lot of time. But if I do sit down and decide I'm going to commit some time to watch something, I want it to be fun and exciting every time I tune in. Right. And that is not that to me. It moves too slow. It very much paces out the sort of exciting fantasy elements. And I think that it really comes down to, it's basically a big soap opera with political intrigue and a lot of nudity. And you know what? I don't care about the nudity. People make it but it's got tits. So what?
Yeah,
I have the internet. I can see tits whenever I want.
Well, you're married.
Yeah, I can see tits whenever I want. But if I want to see different tits, I can go to the internet. You know, it's like, who cares? But I think that this is just my opinion. Not a fan, and I think that Game of Thrones is actually it is a little bit indicative. It is an example of where the medium is going in terms of like how it's. I saw how, and I'm not going to say spoilers because I didn't watch the show, but I saw a lot of rage about the last episode of Game of Thrones. People were very angry at how things developed in the story because they were expecting something. They wanted something to happen that they were hoping for, and it didn't happen in the way that they wanted. And they got really angry about it. And I mean, I won't give it away, but I know what it is because a friend of mine told me because he was watching it and he was like, man, they did this thing and it was bullshit because it should have been this other way. And I was like, yeah, but I told you in season 1, this whole show is about taking what you're hoping for and shitting on it.
Kind of like Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was Rian Johnson's whole thing when he made The Last Jedi. Yeah. He was like, I'm going to subvert your expectations. We're going to do the opposite of what you're expecting. Because I think that, you know, I guess he believed that that's creative. And I didn't even go to the theater for that. I was like, fuck that movie. Like, I saw The Force Awakens because my friends were like, let's go see Force Awakens. And I said, okay, I'm not, like, when I knew it was Rey was the main character, I was like, I have a feeling this movie's going to be shit. Yeah. I'm just giving you the heads up because it's a female character. And no one knows how to write good female characters these days. Very few people can do it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But I said, I'll give it a chance. And I saw it and I was like, this movie's crap. And I said, I called it then. I saw that movie. I said, Star Wars is dead. Yeah. Like, it's dead. Like, they're never going to come back. This trilogy is going to go to shit, and that's going to be the way that people will remember the entire franchise, will be on how it failed. It's kind of like, you know, when you have a band and they do a lot of hit albums and then they make like a couple of really shitty ones and that's what they're remembered for because they retire after that. Yeah. So you don't want to be remembered for the last thing you did if it's shit. But that's it for Star Wars. I'm telling you. And yes, it was based on the fact that Rian Johnson thought he could just do the opposite of what people were expecting or hoping for, and that somehow people would celebrate that like it was an original idea. And I got one last thing. I know I've been talking a lot, but one last thing to that is I understand and I know why this stuff upsets people. Because the thing is, what SJWs hate, one of the things that they hate is they hate masculinity. They hate men, right? They do, as in general. Even the men who are in there, they hate their masculinity. They hate that about themselves. The hero's journey is a masculine story. It is a masculine archetype, and it has aspects in it, things that happen according to a sort of like, it's almost like in our genes to have a reaction to the hero's journey. You can go to the what's the oldest epic tale that we know, like as an example, like Beowulf.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the hero's journey. It goes like, no matter how, Jesus is the hero's journey.
Yep.
Right? So no matter what you look at, and we resonate with it because we understand that there's truth in that. And when I say truth, I don't mean that the events are historically factual. I mean that there is a truth to the hero's journey, that it is a man's story. Men today are craving adventure. They're craving it. This is why they get lost in video games. This is why they get lost in these other hobbies, because they crave the call to adventure, and that we just don't live in a world that gives them that because it's so safe and it's so controlled and stuff, right? And in a lot of ways, it's feminine. And so, like, when a director makes a film that's offering this escape and it doesn't have that, then fans respond negatively. And by the way, women like to watch the male journey as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it's for men. It's like women they know that there's some truth to the journey and they want to, escape in it too. It's like they get lost in that. And so, like, this is the reason why Star Wars has gone to shit, because it's tried to create some new archetype, because these people believe that these things are just like, you can just change things around, like everything is malleable, all is permitted, nothing is there's no such thing as reality, there's no such thing as a real human story, a human narrative. No, it's whatever you can come up with. And so they always get it wrong. Unfortunately, there are enough sheep that they'll just give them money anyway, because they're hoping that it will give them what they want. And because they spent money, this is buyer's remorse, I think, because they spent money on it, even if it's absolute crap, they'll walk out of there and try to convince themselves that it wasn't.
Yeah, pretend that it was good.
Yeah, or try to look on the bright side.
Yeah. Let's see. Victor's in. Hey guys, Rusky's in, Victor's in. Good to see you guys. If you just tuned in, we got Brian with us, and if you didn't realize, the slideshow I've got up front is Brian's work, because you're doing your own comics, right?
Yes, I am. I'm working on 2 comics right now. I have plans for more. It all comes down to once I'm ready to start an Indiegogo, which I have to finish up some pages and make a color cover, and then the writer of one of my books is going to set up the Indiegogo. The other book is something that I'm writing with my wife. We're actually doing it together, and I'm doing all the artwork for it. So it's going to be a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. So yeah, Absolutely. I got a couple comics. Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely worth it, man, and it's good. It's good to see people independently creating these kinds of mediums, because speaking of comics, with the same with movies, we do see this culture war happening, and for example, when I was in, I mentioned this briefly before we started, but when I was in Indonesia, so I left in 2002. So keep that year in mind, all right. I left in 2002, and I came back in 2016. Now, this is it. This is the thing. While I was in Indonesia, obviously, I didn't have my finger on the pulse of what was really going on as far as comic books and stuff, because when I was a kid, I loved collecting comics. I mean, I'm one of those guys that when the movie, let's say, even when Ang Lee's Hulk came out, you remember that?
Yeah, I have it on DVD.
So even when that came out, I went and sat in the movie theater in Indonesia by myself because I had nobody to go with, and watched it. And it was, to me, it was something different than, let's say, the average viewer that would have been in the theater, and the same for the average person that watches those movies now. And
is that the one with Eric Bana and Jennifer Connelly?
Yeah.
That was good. I actually liked that one.
Yeah, man. I mean, I was sitting in the theater, with a wee tear in my eye, because I grew up on that shit. I collected the Hulk. I collected Iron Man. When Iron Man came out, I knew who Iron Man was. Most people didn't.
Yep.
And so, what I'm saying is that the change that started to happen. In the industry of, comics specifically, but it was slowly happening in all sorts of mediums, pop culture mediums. It was something that, to me, for people that were here over those years I was gone, it was like the frog in the boiling water. They slowly turn up the heat. You don't notice the change, but for me, it was a huge, drastic change, man. It just, things were not anything like that in 2002 when I left. And mind you, I wasn't collecting comics at that time. I mean, I stopped collecting them, but I still have my long boxes. I still got them. My brother's got my comics. In fact, I've got a Secret Wars #4 Jim Shooter signed, and I also have a Amazing Spider-Man first appearance Hobgoblin.
Nice.
And it's guess who my brother got to sign that?
I don't know.
Stan Lee, man.
Oh shit! Cool.
But here's what happened. So I went over to my brother's a couple months ago, and he put out a bunch of the comics on the wall from the long boxes, and I'm kind of looking them over. I hadn't read them in a long time, and I'm like, oh yeah, that one, and then there's this one empty space on the wall, and I'm like, what was there? And he goes, oh, that was the Amazing Spider-Man first appearance Hobgoblin signed by Stan Lee. I gave it to my girlfriend.
What?
Oh, God.
Why? I don't understand, though. Why?
I don't know, man. But you gotta... I don't know. Like this girl, he was dating a girl for a while, and then obviously they're not together anymore. I don't know why I gave it, because when he told me that, like, I was in shock. I didn't even know how to feel. I'm just like, I was speechless. I didn't even know what to say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the guy needs his fan card pulled or something.
Oh yeah, man, that's just horrible. But I guess the point I'm getting at is first of all, I mean, I know comics. I know them very well. You know, I was even writing comics in Indonesia, and I had a lot of I was hiring Indonesian artists, and holy shit, there's some good artists there, man. Wow. And for cheap. Like if you were hiring yourself out to draw comics, how much would you charge per page?
I think that if I'm just doing pencils and inks, you gotta like at least charge like $120 a page.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're ripping yourself out, and that doesn't include colors and the word balloons and all that shit. Just like the art.
Right. Yeah. And that's right. I agree. That's a fair price. You know, and when I was doing it, I was paying. I swear to God, man, and I'm talking pencils, ink, and color. I was paying about $10 a page.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
They screwed up that screws up other people too. But yeah, that's the
price.
Amazing.
That's the price for your amateur independent artist. It's anywhere from $10 to $15 a page, right? Depending on, and I wasn't going to professionals, because there's a lot of Indonesian guys that have, you know, worked for Marvel. I think one guy even got fired because he was putting like hidden jihad messages in the comics.
Oh yeah, I remember that. It was an X-Men book. He was putting subtle anti-Jewish messages in the comics.
Yeah, man. but I mean, that's the going price for amateur there. So for the market there, it's fine, obviously. But I mean, you know, so I was into that too. I was doing the same thing. And on a side note, the reason I ended up kind of stopping it is because my ex-wife at the time got jealous that I was spending too much time on my hobby, and she deleted everything.
Oh.
It was fucking...
What?
I'm serious, man. I'm serious. You know, these are MGTOW stories. It's a MGTOW channel. But yeah, so she deleted all my fucking files, and I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of hours of work, because I was doing the word bubbles. I was writing them all, and I was writing them in this. As a writer, what I was doing is I was mapping out every page and every panel, right? And I would explain to the artist, this is what happens in this panel, this on this page, and blah blah blah, right? And then so I put in a lot of hours, a lot of money, and then I come home one day and I'm like, where's all my files? Gone, deleted.
Fuck.
And so you know what I did? I without saying a word, I packed up all my shit and I left.
Was that the last straw?
No, that was it, man. I couldn't even get angry again. It was just like a speechless moment, and I packed up all my stuff and I went and found a room to rent. And then I set to work to try to save as many files as I could. That was horrible. But anyway, that's a MGTOW story on the side note.
Yeah.
But I mean, what I'm getting at is that I didn't see a lot of the culture wars start to penetrate into the medium. And I'll tell you when it first hit me, all right? Because again, I wasn't following. It's very hard to find comic books in Indonesia, all right? You can't just there's no comic book stores. I bought my comics every time I went to Singapore. You know, if I had to go to Singapore for a visa, I'd spend a couple days there, and I'd go to the bookstores and I would buy graphic novels, right? And I'd bring those back with me, and that was my fix, right? So when I first got back, what happened is all of a sudden I go, what? Iceman's gay?
Yeah.
Iceman's gay and Thor's a fucking feminist? I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. A woman.
A woman feminist. That's what I
A
mean.
female feminist. Yes.
A female feminist. It was to the degree that she was actually quoting feminism in the comics. Like, I'm going to punch you because I'm a feminist. I was in shock. So I'm coming from a perspective where I just suddenly dropped into it, where you kind of saw it slowly take hold, over the past decade or whatever. I mean, when did you first kind of notice it?
Yeah, the big moment was the female Thor when they made the announcement. I was reading comics mostly when I was in my youth as a kid. I read comics a lot. Well, I think I grew up really poor, and my mother, she would on her way back from her job, she would stop at this drugstore to pick up odds and ends. And back in those days, they had the spin rack with comics in the drugstore. So we didn't go to comic shops. You just get them at the spin rack. And if the comics were on the rack for too long and they didn't sell, what the drugstore owners would do is they'd tear off the covers. And I guess those get mailed back to the distributor so they can get like some money back or something. But they would take the interior books, which I think is something they weren't really supposed to do, but they did. And they would take like 10 of them randomly, put them all together in a bag and sell them for $1.
Yeah.
So you get like 10 random comics for $1, right? They could be Marvel, DC, whatever. It was just a mixed bag. And she would buy like one of those like a week or something, and she'd bring them home, and I'd have 10 comic books. And they were always like in the middle of the story, and they were random. I'd have some Micronauts, some Star Wars stuff, some, a couple of Marvel heroes, some Transformers, like whatever. And I would, I'd read them, and I got into it back then. When I was, in my sort of preteen years, I had a little allowance. I'd go buy some books, and then I didn't really get into it again until many, many years later. I think I worked a job in my 20s, and I was next door to a comic shop. And so I would stop in there. This is around early 2000s, late 90s, around excuse me. I actually stopped reading comics around then. I bought them for a while, and I think I quit around 2002, 2003. And I stopped reading them because I moved out of there, and I was like living someplace else, and it just wasn't close by. So I was like, but it was cool at the time. I didn't really see a lot of that, and this sort of overt, SJW stuff. So when they announced female Thor, I was well into, Gamergate at this point, and pretty red pilled and stuff. So when I heard they were doing that, I was like, okay, this is a gimmick to sell books. But I think that the book is going to be awful. Like I was saying it back then, I was like, the book's going to be terrible because, I know how this ideological possession can affect or has an effect on people's ability to create art. Because it just affects what their decisions are and how they go forward. And I thought this is going to be a shit book. And sure enough, I saw I bought it because I was like, okay, so, people were saying you can't criticize it unless you read it yourself. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm doing the show, so I'm going to buy the books and I'm going to critique them. Right. And I did. And we predicted Comicsgate based on the first issue of that female Thor book, and this is way before Comicsgate actually happened. I was like, this is going to become a gate. Yeah. And sure enough,
you were right, man. Yeah. You were absolutely right.
Yeah, you can see it. I'm telling you right now, there's animation. I had a guest on Friday. He's an animator. His name is Luke Weber, and he worked on like Ben 10 and Ninja Turtles, and like he's had a lot of big jobs. He worked on Steven Universe. He worked on he's been doing this for like 15 years or something like that. And I'm telling you right now that if it hasn't happened already, there will be an animation gate as well. And I'll say this: this is important, not just because we happen to be we happen to be into comics, or we happen to be into video games, or you happen to be into animation or movies or whatever. This is actually affecting men's lives because the people who create the most memorable and the best work in all of these mediums are men. Yep. It's basically our male-dominated fields, and these are men who are using their creative muscle to make good movies, to make good cartoons, to make good anime, to make good video games, to make good comic books, and they're being pushed out, you know, by SJWs,
Yeah.
you know, these cultural terrorists, because they want to make room for their people and their politics. And they're not just, and men are literally losing their jobs. Like this guy, Luke Weber, who's very good at what he does. I mean, I've seen his artwork. He actually made me a piece of fan art of my comic book character Bombshell, and it is amazing. Like I sometimes I just pull it out and look at it because this guy's really good. And he doesn't have a job. Jesus. Because people wanted him out, and lots of people get pushed out. You know, if you guys are watching, if you know about this video game that was very popular, it's called Skullgirls, and it was basically like, I think it was actually a Kickstarted project with this Asian guy that did all the art, and it has this very animated style. He got pushed out as well. Jeez. You know, like this is happening all over, and it's all men losing their jobs. So, and to drive this point home, it doesn't matter if you're MGTOW or PUA or an MRA or none of those things, or you're a red pillar or whatever. If you're a person that just wants to work in an industry and you're a man, you could lose your job if these people set their sights on that industry. And they have. As soon as these things start making real money, that are like, they become really big, these people move in, they get jobs there, and they start pushing men out. I mean, and then they do it with accusations. Like this guy, I don't think they actually straight up made an accusation about my guest, but he is very certain, although he can't prove it, that he was pushed out because of Me Too allegations. And this is how they're actually, you have to watch my video that I did, because it gets really involved. Like there's a lot of shit going on in these industries where they're replacing men that have been there, that are veterans, that have worked really hard, and they're pushing them out to make room for more diverse people, which means women. That's what it means. So like being a black man, being a gay man, being a Muslim man, it's not going to protect you. It's being a woman, and more accurately, being a feminist woman or being a lesbian woman. And I'm not saying that's true. Yeah, that's what I've seen.
Oh yeah, man, so, it's true. And people that deny it they're just going to be hurt later. They're going to be in for a really shitty surprise. Hey, I want to show you some of the work that these artists in Indonesia did, real quick.
You sent me some of this stuff. I actually have it on my my computer.
Okay, I just want to share this.
Audience?
Yeah, I'll share with the audience. So, just a couple real quick. All right, so the one I got up now, can you see it?
Well, you have like this. Are you? Oh yeah, there. I see it now. Gargoyle.
It's like. All right, so the guy that did this, he was a little more expensive. He was charging me about $20 a page. Mm-hmm. So wow, it's good.
Yeah, for $20, it's amazing.
Yeah, for $20.
That guy needs to move to the U.S. He can rick it in. He can seriously rick it in.
He was one of the more popular artists there. Like this guy was a professional. I don't know if he's done work for any of the major companies, but I'm sure if he wasn't then, he probably is. He probably is now. And then I just wanted to show you this one because this is sort of a cover page I had. He also did, this same guy here is a different guy. He did the interior work as well. This guy, his name was Pak Man. He is the Jack Kirby of Indonesian comics.
Yeah.
I was really lucky to meet him. He charged me $15 a page.
Holy shit! Yeah, you really did well. That's a good deal. It's actually kind of scary because if those guys started charging that kind of money for those books here in the West, like we would stop getting work because we'd be asking for too much. That's like a tenth of what I think that's worth.
Yeah.
At least because that's got color and everything. That's
well, no, the color. Someone else did the color. Oh,
so that was a separate price.
Yeah, someone else did the color, but the ink and the pencils. And this guy, remember, this guy is literally the Jack Kirby of Indonesia. I mean, when Marvel he was doing comics in Indonesia back in the early 70s. So I met him through another artist I met, and man, he was just amazing. I mean, I wrote out the stories, gave it to him, and he was just like, boom, 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 fucking done. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And I still have the original pages he did. So I'm gonna hold on to those because they might be worth some money someday.
Yeah, like $20.
But here's the thing, man. Like that's the price that I got because I was there. If I was here and I was asking them, they would ask for more. They're not dumb. They know.
Yeah, well, they should. I mean, shit. Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to quickly show you that.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Oh yeah, man. Good quality. Let's see. We got Rusky's in. Nono's is in, guys. Okay, good to see you guys. Again, we got Brian Martinez. If you just tuned in, and we are going over the culture wars of pop culture, and it's a very, very sad thing. I wanted to say on another note, not much of it, not really a digression, but when we talked about the feminist Thor. And I mentioned it too as the first thing I kind of saw when I got back. It was that and Gay Iceman. And I just, what the fuck happened?
Yeah.
But I have to mention that if you go back to some of the earlier Marvel works, now I'm not as familiar with DC as I am with Marvel, but I've got a lot of digital comics on my computer. I got thousands of them. And if you go back, there are some, you'll see some politics pushed into the comics back then.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
One example I can,
especially in the 70s, I think it was a big one because the civil rights movement and
yes,
the feminist movement was in high, so there was definitely some of that back then for sure.
Well, I can give you two examples. One is the character Black Panther. Now,
yeah,
and this is the funny thing about it is that the character Black Panther came out, I think, in '67 or '68. It was his first appearance. Kirby and Lee created that character, and that was
two Jews.
Two Jews created that character, and it came out a year before the founding of the Black Panther movement.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Yeah, and I'm sure it was inspired by the character. I mean, we don't know for certain, but I'm fairly certain. Because
Absolutely.
the thing about SJWs is pop culture is extremely important to them. Have you ever noticed that?
Yes.
Like they if you look at like the speeches that they give, like feminists and Black Lives Matter activists and gay activists, they talk about like what they perceive to be real issues, even whether they're valid or not. They think that they're real. So things like police brutality, things like everyday sexism in the workplace, sexual harassment, yada yada. Mm-hmm. But then then they think, or they treat just as important, they treat things like female representation in movies, or fewer instances of Disney princesses being treated like damsels. They treat it the same. That to them is just as important. And so they're very invested in pop culture, and they often reference it. Like, have you guys noticed how many SJWs read Harry Potter after Trump got elected? Because that's how connected they are. They were raised by this stuff.
Well, and they confuse it with reality too.
Yeah, because and I think that is an example, in my opinion, why the Black Panther Party probably, it's highly likely they saw those comics and they said, this guy is going to be our mascot, is going to be our symbol, and we're going to adopt the name.
And another example I wanted to give about of that sort of culture wars in comics back in the 70s. There was a character, I'm not sure who created this, but it probably goes back to Kirby and Lee again. But there, and actually she made an appearance as a black woman in Thor Ragnarok, is Valkyrie.
Uh-huh.
Now, Valkyrie was originally obviously a tall white Nordic woman with blonde hair. And there was an issue of the Hulk that I had. And I remember just after I got back, I was going through old issues and just kind of exploring if these things existed in the past, as they did today, as they are now. And there was one issue, and I can't remember the issue now, but it wouldn't be hard to find. It's a issue of the Incredible Hulk. It was in the 1970s. The character was Valkyrie, and which is normally related to Thor comics, but she made an appearance in Hulk. And in that comic, the cover is her beating up on Hulk. And if you a couple panels in the comic, she actually says the word feminism, and a strong woman is beating up the Hulk. So that did exist.
Yeah.
It was there.
Yes, absolutely. They did that with Wonder Woman in the DC Comics. In the 1970s, there was a period where the DC actually tried to get woke in the 1970s to feminism. And the way they did it was they had a thing happen where Wonder Woman lost her superpowers, and instead she fought everybody with karate. And she had this kind of, there was just like this woman in, I swear to God, she was wearing pants and everything. Like she wasn't dressed in like the Wonder Woman costume. It was like a Hillary Clinton pantsuit thing. Oh, yeah. And she was doing karate and like beating up men, twice her size and stuff. And they thought that was like a feminist thing. Like she was like this modern woman, that didn't wear the Amazon bikini or leotard or whatever. And, she was realistic and she did martial arts, and that was Wonder Woman. And Gloria
Steinem.
That's
right. I forgot about that.
And Gloria Steinem and the feminists, they actually hated that. They actually pushed against it because they hated the fact that they took away her powers, because they were like, well, but she was a goddess and you took away her powers. And so they actually thought that it wasn't doing that accurately. And so DC Comics had to, they had to like essentially backpedal on it, not just because of Gloria Steinem, but also because, the comics weren't selling, because yes, even in the 1970s, people didn't really want, if you got woke, you could go broke. Like that goes back to then. But yes, they did attempt that. And so this isn't new that these attempts were made.
Yeah, I think maybe what you said is you said that they feel like they're running out of time, or maybe it's just that they are starting to feel they have a stronger influence overall.
Like today?
Yeah, today.
I think mainly it's because they don't have any patience. So they believe that if we don't change something now, then the world's going to end. Think about, and I'm trying to like broaden this because I do think this is a broader conversation, not just because like I love talking about comics. I can do it all the live long day, but I think we are talking about a small facet of a much larger problem. Oh, yeah. And I think that this also invites Lamprey to like comment if he wants to. But think of it this way: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a very good example of the typical modern progressive. She's not extreme. She's typical of that. Okay, and she claimed the world is going to end in 15 years or 12 years or whatever it was if we don't do something about climate change. The left. SJWs on the left, they are in a hurry because they think the world is ending. Not just because of climate change, but it could be ending because Donald Trump's going to start a war, or he's going to, crown himself emperor and start the Mad Max thing is going to happen. Like they just have this they're in this perpetual state of anxious urgency that something has to be done now. And so they're willing, and that's because of this kind of revolutionary rhetoric that they're fed, not just that something has to happen, but that you are the one that's going to do it, and you have to do it with violence. Have you seen the CBS thing for that show? There's a show called The Good Fight on CBS, and they did like this little bit where the guy, yeah, you saw it, right? Where he's talking about it's time to punch some Nazis. Like this is not crazy rhetoric to them. This is what they want revolution now because they're in a hurry. They can't wait. You can see multiple instances of people saying we need to change things now because they don't want to wait. So yeah, when the way in which they influence culture, when they start injecting their woke politics into people's entertainment pastimes, is because they're trying to mobilize people who aren't woke to them to get them to essentially start the revolution. That's what they want to do. Wow. So they don't do it. They're not subtle because subtlety takes too long. And I think that Yuri Bezmenov, the ex-KGB guy, he talked about that. He said
I know who that is.
In a couple of generations, they're going to be absolutely radical, and you're not going to be able to change their minds because they've been indoctrinated over the course of generations very slowly, and so they're just going to be violent radicals. And so we have Antifa. And this is all connected. So the culture war is just like one of the ways in which this is expressing itself. And I do believe that culture is absolutely crucial because it's how, and they knew that. That's why they've been doing this, because it's how you get people to start thinking about things differently. But because they're rushing to do things, there are missteps, and normal people start to see, like, the mask is slipping a bit, and they're like, why did this turn out to be shit? Or, they'll say things like, can you please get your woke politics out of my product? But what they don't understand is that that's not going to go away. You can't just ask them to stop. You actually have to vocally, push back. Like, you have to really become active.
Yeah, when you said they feel like they're running out of time. That's something I never really thought about it that way. But I think you're right.
Yeah, we've covered that, and when we did cover it, I think it's maybe going back 6 months ago, is that perhaps the people that rule over Western civilization, Western Europe and the United States, Canada, Australia, is that they are now aware of their immortality. They know that they're at the end of their lifespans. Look at George Soros's age. Look at Henry Kissinger. These guys are all in their 90s, and now it's come to they're now waking up like, oh my God, I've wasted all this time. I got to speed this process up as much as possible so I can see it before I pass on.
Jesus, I wonder, how come those guys live fucking forever?
Well, when you have that kind of money.
Yeah.
So I do personally believe that's what the case is. That's why you see this speed up. It's because most of the guys that were, in their 40s, 30s, and 40s during the Cold War, and they accumulated all this wealth. Now they're at the peak of their wealth. They're at the peak of their power. But the problem is that they're all in their 80s and 90s. Like, what's his face? Brzezinski just passed away last year.
Oh,
and all these guys are kind of on borrowed time. So that's why you see this open borders policy. You see the destruction of comic book characters. Mm-hmm. You see what they're doing to Star Wars. Now 007 is under attack. So that's my take.
Yeah, and they do that because these are figures that we admired. I wouldn't say worshipped, but I think that especially masculine figures like James Bond, like superheroes, they embody a masculine spirit. There's a guy you should check also if you don't know about him. I highly recommend his channel. I had him on Honey Badger Radio for an interview. His name is Literature Devil, and he's a writer, and he basically made a video called Why Comics Are for Men. And he explains that, even if they feature female characters, these books were made with men as an audience in mind because they embody characteristics and values and virtues that men find admirable. Mm-hmm. They aspire towards, right? Like, what is it today? Here, I'll give you an example. We'll talk a little bit about Avengers Endgame because I got to use this to give you my example.
Okay, good.
So spoilers for Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, guys, we're going to talk about Avengers Endgame and spoil it. If you haven't seen it, you can drop out now and come back later. And right before you get into that, Brian, do you know Xana Maru says, thanks for the compliments on my art.
That's me. I'm Xana Maru. Yeah, I have 2 channels, and one is like just my name.
He's sneaking around.
The other one is no, I just this is the one I'm normally logged in with because it's where most of my subs, like most of the people I follow, are under Xana Maru. Okay. So that's me. Okay. So I was yeah, because people said somebody complimented my art, so I want to say thanks.
Yeah, it's good. It's good, man.
Yeah. So okay, Avengers Endgame. I'll give you an example. So normally, I love of the Marvel characters. I have lots of favorites, but as an adult, my favorite character is Captain America, and I'm not that patriotic a person, so it's not about that. It's about no. I mean, like it's what I mean by that is that I didn't pick Captain America because he has America in the name. It's because of something bigger than that. It's because of what he is, the kind of man that other men want to be like in terms of his integrity and his resolve and his willingness to never give up. And, it's that kind. He embodies those values. He embodies American values too. But what I'm basically making this clear to contrast that, Captain America may have been in the 40s when World War II was going on and he first sort of came out. He was sort of a tool of patriotism to sort of push pro-American propaganda. Absolutely fine with that. It was a product of its time. Yeah. But when they brought him back in the 60s and they started writing stories about it, he became not a symbol of the American government.
No.
He became a symbol of American values, which are different, obviously, because we've had corrupt governments and politicians can be corrupt and stuff. And Cap always, he's the moral center. He's the moral compass, right?
Yep.
But he's not the most powerful character. No. He's just some guy who fights well. And so because of that, it puts him in situations in the books where he's up against things that are way out of his league, but he doesn't care, right? He goes towards the fire. And so I admire that, and I like that about him because it's aspirational. It's something that I want to be like. In the DC side, I use Superman, and I know a lot of people, don't like him because they say he's too powerful. But you see, what I love about him is not what he can do. What I love about him is that he has the same kind of integrity and the same kind of values.
Yeah, what he stands for.
Yeah, it's what he stands for. It's the same. They basically are the same in terms of their personality and the admirable masculine traits that they have.
Well, and on a side note, what you just said, and I'll let you continue in a second, is that those two characters, I agree, Superman and Captain America they're the same character pretty much, but they also show kind of the big difference between Marvel and DC. Marvel's characters more relatable, whereas DC's are sort of more out of touch. But anyway, that's just
they are. They're almost alien. I mean, that includes Batman too.
Yeah.
But the go ahead.
No, I was just continue. Sorry.
Okay, so here's my point. The way that men tend to consume content, like comics, film, whatever, if they feature masculine archetypes that are admirable, men don't feel the need to feel as though they could be that person. Men they can admire the greatness in other men from afar if they're mature, without feeling the envy that usually accompanies that, where you basically feel like, well, I wish I was Superman or whatever, because that creates resentment. Typically, men will admire great people. They don't have to be fictional, but I'm using this as an example, right? That's how I believe that for sure. That's how men work, right? That's why if you read stories, let's say you read novels and you read stories that were written by men for a male audience, the male characters or the characters in those stories tend to be written very well and unique with their own set of traits and flaws and so on. We could use Luke Skywalker as another example. That's the hero's journey in a nutshell. It's a Star Wars story.
Yeah.
There may have been children that said, they wanted to be Luke Skywalker, but for the most part, people admired Luke Skywalker for his traits, not because they wanted to put themselves in his shoes. I'm making this distinction because the way women read stories is very different. When women read stories, if you read a cheesy romance novel, for example, or 50 Shades of Grey or Twilight or whatever, women want characters that are women, for sure, because they identify with the gender more strongly than men do. Men don't necessarily need that, but it'd be nice. Mm-hmm. But they also want characters that are almost like empty shells that they can put themselves into. So female characters tend to have less of a personality. I mean, look at again, I never read 50 Shades of Grey, but if you know, like, I think
why not?
No, because it sounds like crap. Anastasia Steele, I think, is her name, like the main character from that, or the main character from Twilight, or the main character from any romance novel that you can get off of any shelf. They're all the same person. They're nobody, but that's on purpose because women want to put themselves into the stories, whereas men want to watch the stories.
Right.
So it's like a different way of experiencing the medium. Now, I say that to mean that today we've had this weird blurring of the lines in terms of like what gender a piece of media is made for, and so you have a lot of things that are blurring these lines. And what I've noticed is that because of this change, this shift, the idea of Captain America as a person, it's no longer a person named Steve Rogers, who in the 1940s was a sickly young kid that really wanted to fight for his country but couldn't. But then he met this benevolent scientist that gave him a super soldier serum, which allowed him to fight the Nazis in World War II, right?
Great story. Great history, man.
Absolutely. That's not Captain America now. Now Captain America is anyone who can wear the shield and is basically deemed worthy. And I say that because this is what happens exactly at the end of Infinity War.
Yeah.
Captain America passes the torch to Falcon.
Yes.
This is the spoiler. I apologize. He gives him the shield and he effectively says, "You are now Captain America."
Yeah.
Now, what's the problem with this? It's sentimentally, it's nice. However, Falcon is not Captain America. No. He's just not. He's the Falcon.
Not even close.
Not even close. Right. The difference is the Falcon is not a skinny kid that, despite all of his issues, was determined to fight in the war effort and was then given a super soldier serum, which made him greater than a normal man. Like, Captain America's not a normal guy. Yeah. He's not even a normal guy that worked really hard on like his P90X / calisthenics to be as swole as possible. And like, he's beyond that. He is a super person.
He's defined by Marvel as the absolute possible peak of human condition.
Right.
So basically,
steroids, basically.
Well, more than steroids. Like.
No, I know the super soldier serum. Yeah.
But that's basically how they define him. Like he's able to lift or press 1 ton. So,
yes, right, with a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he has a certain personality. He commands. Like, he has a commanding presence. He is like a great strategist. He can motivate people. He's a natural born leader. He has all of these qualities. Okay, The Falcon is a good character, but you can't simply declare that person Captain America. And I say this because this passing of the torch thing, which happens on multiple instances in Infinity War, and not just limited to that, but it's all over the place. Like, have you ever seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animated Spider-Man movie recently?
It was awesome.
Yes. They had this. It was a good movie, but they had the same thing. There was a statement in that film, and the directors, when they won the award for Best Animated Feature, that for that movie, they said it in their speech. They said, "If you can wear the mask, anyone can be Spider-Man."
Right.
So what does that mean? They said the same. The Captain America thing is the same. He gave him the shield arbitrarily. He was like, "I think you're a good man. You're good enough for this," even though he's really not.
Yes, he's not.
I like Falcon, but he's not the right man for this. But the purpose of it is this. This goes back to what I was talking about, in which the way that men experience mediums and the way women experience mediums. Right. See, when you take exceptional people, like Spider-Man, like Captain America.
Peter Parker is Spider-Man.
Yes, but he's an exceptional person. No one else can, like, other people have said they're Spider-Man, but when you say Spider-Man to anyone, they think of Peter Parker. Mm-hmm. Like, he's not replaceable. They believe, because this is SJW thinking, okay? Social justice warriors and leftists don't believe in meritocracy. They don't believe that there are people who are better at things than other people, because that means that there must be a system of oppression in place. That means that something is unfair. So instead, they believe that all things are interchangeable. So anyone can be Spider-Man. They mean that. They mean that anyone can be Spider-Man. This is why the Miles Morales thing, I know there are people who are fans of the character, but I am not a fan of the character because I know that it's subtle, but at the core of that idea is anyone can be Spider-Man. And it's very important that it be a non-white character.
Which is bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. Yes. Not anybody can be Spider-Man, not anybody can be Captain America.
Right, but that's what they're doing. So the directors of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, they said it while they were at the award show. They said, "We believe that anyone can be this character. We thought it was important that people saw a character that looked like them." See, this is that idea that people see characters that look like you. That's a female idea. Mm-hmm. Men don't do that. Men don't care about that. Black Panther was popular in the 60s with everybody that read comics. And if you read those, I have actually one reprint of a very old Black Panther book.
It's like Black Panther title or a different title?
No, the Black Panther. It was a Black Panther title, illustrated by Jack Kirby, written by Stan Lee. Nice. I have that book, and I have one of them. And I think I have a Marvel Masterwork, which is basically like reprints of a bunch of really old ones from the 60s. Yep. Here's the thing about Black Panther, though. When you read the books in the 60s, no mention of race at all. No mention of race.
Except for the name.
Except in his name. And of course, when he took off the mask, that was a black guy. But like, if you read the book, if you read his books, they did not use him as a tool to talk about racism in America at all. No. He was just another superhero going on crazy psychedelic stories where he was traveling to distant planets and other dimensions and fighting like Aztec warrior kings.
Classic Kirby.
Crazy shit. Yes, crazy Kirby shit. Yeah. Nothing about race. And the reason that they did that was because Stan and Jack at that time knew that what gets people to buy the books is not woke politics. It's just good stories. Yes. And that no one has to. If you tell a story with Black Panther well enough, everyone will resonate with Black Panther. If you make Black Panther's story about him being black, then you're only inviting black people to relate to Black Panther. You are literally, by definition, limiting your audience. And they did that because they didn't tell good stories. And so this is what they're doing now with the Avengers Endgame. So like they passed the torch with Cap. He gave a thing to Falcon. I know why, because again, they want to get woke and they want Captain America to be a black guy. Yep. Even though Falcon is, and I'm telling you, like, there's no way. I think that this is what they're going to do, actually. If they ever make an actual Captain America movie with Falcon as Captain America, you will see him fighting as well as Captain America did.
Even though he can't.
Even though there's no way that could be. But because he was given the shield and told he was Captain America, then he becomes Captain America. This is what I'm talking about. Well, this is why this thing transcends this problem. It transcends just comics because it's about the way the left sees the world and how they're putting it into their mediums.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, everything you said about Miles Morales, 100% agree. I felt the exact same way when that character was first introduced. And it's amazing how they try to push it. Like they really try to sell that shit, man. Mm-hmm. When in Endgame, I was as soon as and again, this is spoilers, guys, so close your ears. But as soon as I saw he's not Mexican. as soon as I saw Cap come back as an old man, I was like, ooh, they're gonna give the shield to Bucky. And then,
but you know what? Personally, that's another thing that I will tell you, that pissed me off because it makes no sense that he would have given it to Falcon.
No.
He's known Bucky for a lot longer. And if you look at the history of the films, he had risked a lot more for Bucky.
Yep.
Why would he? But why did he give it to Falcon? Well, I think it's obvious.
Exactly. You know? There was no reason for him to do it. And another thing, too, on the same line as their intentions, is that if they really wanted to go woke and impress the people that don't really fucking care about these characters, they would have made Cap gay.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, that's how far they, and that's actually I think that's a hint at the direction they will eventually come to.
Oh, they absolutely said that they're going to they're going to be going into more LGBT representation in future Marvel films. They're going to go full diversity. It's dead. Like if you saw Endgame, for me that's literally what this is, the end game, because I'm not watching
End
anymore.
game, right?
I'm done.
Yeah, man, it's right, Lamprey. It's the end of well, specifically, it's the end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it.
Yeah. They got one more movie that's still in phase 3, which is the new Spider-Man, and then I think that's the end for me. I'm done. Like I doubt that they'll be able to do anything as good as they've done. And I can go into why I think it's going to go to shit, like in detail, but you can actually see. So I've watched all of the MCU films, all of them except for Captain Marvel, the only one I didn't see, because fuck that movie, and also because I understand you didn't have to watch it anyways. It didn't ruin anything. But one thing I noticed is, and this is actually, you can watch them all again and you'll see the transition. When the MCU started out, it was a tiny Marvel studio. Yep. They had Kevin Feige and a few directors that just really were passionate about the source material, like Jon Favreau, who says he was a big comic book nerd, when he was a kid, and so he wanted to do Iron Man. And they got people like Kenneth. Go ahead.
He did Daredevil before that, even. Like Favreau was on your point. Favreau was dedicated to the source material. That's what I wanted to say.
Yes, he was. He was interested in adapting the source material, and I think that that's a rare thing. And so him and Kenneth Branagh, who did the Thor movie, and they had like this small group of people, and at the time the only thing that the studio wanted to pull off, and it was, even then I remember people naysaying it back then. They said there's no way this is gonna work, this is gonna be a shit show, and I was like, you know what, I said all they have to do is stay true to the source material and get it right visually, tonally, and story wise, and this will be a fucking success. If they do that, if they don't compromise, then it's going to be a success. Because one of the only reasons why previous attempts at Marvel movies have been, let's say, they ran hot and cold, some were okay, some were pretty bad, was because one of the main reasons why that is because the people involved in the projects before Marvel Studios took over were people who were not only a little bit interested, or they saw, something in it that they could use to tell a story, or they thought that they could make some money, and or they were working with a low budget, but they weren't allowed to sort of create an actual universe with it. So everything had to exist in a vacuum. So like when Bryan Singer did the X-Men, there were no aliens, there was no magic, there was none of the other stuff in the MCU. It was just mutants. And so it limited him, but Bryan Singer wanted to make a statement about homosexuality, and he just used the X-Men as a tool to do it. Yeah. And that's what the X-Men movies are about. Yeah. Honest to God, like his movies. That's what all they're about.
No, absolutely, man.
Yeah. And so let me get to what I was going to say. So if you watch the very first phase, which is the first Hulk movie, the first Thor movie, the first Cap movie, and the first Iron Man movie, and the first Avengers movie, just those, and Iron Man 2 actually, so just those, they tried to stay as close to the source material as possible within reason. So, Tony Stark wasn't in Vietnam because that would make him 100 years old. So they made him in Afghanistan or the Middle East or whatever. So, but they didn't change much. And visually, it was all very, very close to the comics. Yep. And they made a lot of money on those movies. Now, once they made a lot of money with those movies after phase 1, then people with deeper pockets that had way more power started taking interest in those movies. Then DC Comics was scrambling to play catch up because they were actually one of the main ones making fun of the idea that Marvel was going to do that. And then when they did, they were like, holy shit, we can't just use Batman anymore to make movies. We got to actually make movies now. Well, I guess we're going to try and make a DC universe. And that's still struggling to get off the ground, right? It's fucked. So, oh yeah, they're just, sadly, the best movie they've made is Wonder Woman. That was the sad. So, but after that got attention, people started getting involved, and what I noticed is that as soon as and I'm not blaming Disney as a company for this. I'm more so looking at the specific agents within Disney that started getting involved with the Marvel projects. I noticed that over time, the movies have been moving little by little away from the source material in small, subtle ways, with a few exceptions as it's gone along. And I'll give you a perfect example. The one character that I'm the most upset about in terms of how they treated him in Endgame is Thor.
Oh, God, it was horrible.
And the reason why is because I believe that Thor is the most typically masculine character in the entire MCU. He is the manliest dude in the whole series, okay? And he has the most interesting character arc, too. If you look at it, if you just look at all the Thor movies and the movies that Thor appeared in, and they are, he goes through the most changes, but he's actually the manliest dude. But here's what I noticed. If you look at the way that Chris Hemsworth looked as the character in the very first Thor film, he has long blonde hair, blue eyes,
dyed eyebrows, man. They dyed his eyebrows blonde.
The eyebrows, the beard, everything. Okay, they tried to get it exactly right with Thor. He even wore the helmet with the wings and shit in the first movie. And the second one, he was still blonde and blue-eyed. In the Avengers movie, he was still blonde and blue-eyed. But later on, his eye color became whatever its natural color was. His hair was his natural hair.
Well, and they gave him a new eye.
Yes, and then they took away his eye and
you know what color his new eye was?
It was
it's brown.
Black?
It's brown.
Brown. Yeah. Yeah. But he was moving away from the way he was supposed to look. You know, the Iron Man armors have also slowly over time, they started off as about as close as you could get. And then over time, they've started to move away from it. Where, you know, in general, it looks about the same. But there's a lot of liberties that get taken. And they've been doing that slowly over time. And one of the things that I noticed was that in this last Thor movie, he was like almost a different person, and not just because of him being fat and like dressed up like the dude from The Big Lebowski and like drinking and all that, but he was dumb, which he was never like that before.
No,
you could look at those old movies. He's not stupid. They made him bumbling. They emasculated him completely.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that they did that, and I honestly don't think the Russo brothers
that wasn't their idea. But that started in Ragnarok. You could see it happening there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big shift in Ragnarok. Actually, I liked Ragnarok, but there was definitely stuff I did not like, and one of them was the treatment of Thor. Yeah. And I did not care for the Valkyrie character because she was about as two-dimensionally cardboard as most of the women in these movies are. And I know the reason for it is because these people who write these stories, they're just so cucked by this like idea that we can't write women as whole people that have flaws and shortcomings, and that they can be the butt of people's jokes, and that they can be weaker than other people. Like, they just don't know how to do it, and so they end up with these really uninteresting Mary Sue characters almost every single time, with one exception. The way the Russo brothers handled Black Widow in The Winter Soldier. She was actually well done because she was confident, but she never outshined Captain America because she can't, and because it's not her movie.
Yes.
But she did her part to help, and they treated each other as colleagues. There was no bullshit romance. They didn't do any of that. They handle it very well, but that's rare. Most of the time they don't get that right.
They had a small window to make that, and it's not going to open again. And on another point is the original Valkyrie, like I said before, was actually a very tall, Nordic, robust, blonde-haired woman. Now it's this sort of like short, angry mulatto.
Yeah, she's a mulatto
chick.
Mulattoes, I don't know if you ever noticed this. Maybe you've talked about it on a show. I don't know. Have you ever noticed that when it comes to race activists, Black Lives Matter type activists, mulattoes are the loudest and most angry? They tend to make up the majority of the people that had the most to say. Look at Jordan Peele. He's mixed.
Yeah.
Look Tessa Thompson, the woman from the played Valkyrie. Look at Colin Kaepernick, he's mixed. The mixed people tend to be the most radical, and I think it's because they're. I mean, I don't want to like get too much on a tangent here, but I think it's because they're legit fighting against the idea. They hate the idea that they have white in them.
You know,
or the opposite. They hate the fact they have black in them.
Yeah, you never know. But you know who you left out of that list there, Brian? Is Obama.
Yeah.
It's funny because
Obama.
They still call him the first black president, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, but he's mixed.
He's half. He's half and fucking half, man.
Well, they don't know their identity. That's also the big problem with them. So they have to lash out because they lack identity. They don't know what their problems were. I mean, it's probably an uncomfortable reality that if your mother is white and the father was black, you now know your mother was out banging some hoodlum for for blunt and crack and Oxycontin. So yeah, of course you're going to be radicalized and pissed off about it.
Well, and
the problem with that is too, I think, with these mulattoes and why they get this rage is the black community polices black behavior a lot. Like it's like a big part of it, right? So being black is not just having dark skin and like having West African descent in America. Being black is a way of acting. It is a cultural thing. You have to act black. You have to listen to black music. You have to eat black food. You have to talk like black people. And this is not something that anybody else applies pressure except blacks within the black community itself. So if you don't act like they do, then they will shame you for it. They will say you're acting white. They will call you a race traitor.
What's that?
Uncle Ruckus.
Yeah, you. That's exactly right. They'll call you Uncle Tom or a coon or something. It is what they do, and I think. Yeah, and I think mixed people, one of the issues they have is they have to prove that they're black. They can't be mixed. This is why they don't call themselves mixed.
Right. That
because
makes
they
sense.
can't be mixed because the black community doesn't let them do it. I mean, it's like the reason why. You ever heard of code switching?
What?
It's the reason why black people do code switching. You know what code switching is?
No, what the fuck is that?
Okay. Well, maybe it's a Canadian. Maybe Canadians don't know about it because you guys don't have actual black people. You have like St.
We just got Indians, man.
No, I mean you do, but they're not like they're not like descendants of like West African slavery. They're mostly people from like the Caribbean, like St. Lucians and Jamaicans.
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
a lot of Jamaicans and East Africans.
Yeah, and Belizeans are people that straight up from Africa, like the continent. Yeah. So like, code switching is if you're black and you live in Black America. Mm-hmm. And you grew up in a black neighborhood. Everyone expects you to talk like black people. They call it Ebonics, but all it is just like broken kind of Southern English with lots of slang in it. That's the way black people talk. That's a Southern thing. Like white people in the South talk like that too. But they expect you to talk this way, and this is no matter where you live. So like I have friends, or I had, because they unfriended me when they found out I voted for Trump, but whatever. I had friends in Chicago who were black guys, and they did very well for themselves. They grew up in the hood, and then when they made enough money and they like got an education, they got a good job, they moved out and they started, they live out in the suburbs, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I would see them and we would spend time together and hang out, they would talk the same way that I'm talking to you right now.
Yeah.
Just like you, just talking like this.
Yeah.
But what I noticed is that if we came around other black people, specifically people that they knew, like in their family, or if we just talked to other black people, like maybe mutual friends that I had that were black, that they were like hanging out with, they would change the way they talked to talk more like what we typically associate with the way black people talk. They would actually change the way they talk. Yeah. For them. And that's called code switching. And that's something that black people do as a means of, I believe, hiding their true self from other black people. Because they don't want other black people to realize that they actually talk the way I'm talking. They want to talk like that. And this is culturally enforced from within the black community. And that's the reason, I believe, why mixed people are so angry.
Yep.
Because they don't know where they sit, and I think a lot of that pressure comes from blacks, because I have to tell you that black people are pretty racist towards white people.
Oh yeah, man.
I would say more racist towards white people than white people are towards black people.
No,
for
but
sure.
That's absolutely right. That's some serious social engineering, man. Serious social engineering, and I think the language of blacks too is a big part of the social engineering that happened through the civil rights movement and the black communities. It's horrible. It's a horrible thing. But you're absolutely right, man. And and on a side note to that, why is it that when someone is half black and half white, they identify as black and not white? If white, if it's such a privilege to be white.
Yeah, well, they would say that they would argue, this is what I know mixed people would say. They would say that the reason why they identify as black is because they believe that white people would simply declare them black. But I believe that that's projection. I believe that it's black people that would call them black, and not or they would shame them and say that they're mixed because they have that good hair or whatever.
They have the good hair.
I've seen that. Like, I knew when I was in high school, I knew a girl named Tasha Ware, and she was mixed. She was half black and half white. And I thought she was gorgeous. I thought she was the prettiest girl in the school. And the school I went to, by the way, it was like 90% black. I went to a school close to a ghetto in Chicago called Cabrini Green, which used to be, in those days, that was the most violent ghetto in the entire city. And I was like going to school like 3 blocks from there. And there was this mixed girl that was ashamed of being mixed. She had to constantly try to tell people that she was just black and she wasn't mixed. But I knew she was mixed because her skin was light and her hair was curly but not kinky. She was clearly mixed. And I thought that was great.
She looked like a nice cup of coffee.
Yes, exactly. She had some cream in her coffee. That's what it is. She had some cream in her coffee. But, I mean, I thought she was the cutest girl, and like, no, I did not understand why she was so ashamed of that. But anyway, we're getting way off track, but I do think that is culturally enforced from within the black community, and I think that wokeness is absolutely necessary, and it gets enforced from other black people. That's where the pressure comes from.
Yeah, and we got off track when we were talking about Valkyrie being a mulatto. That's where we sort of went off the rails. But I want to just quickly give a few seconds here to look at some of the comments, because I don't have super chats, so I want to give it a little chance, and I don't have a lot of viewers, so
you have enough subs to do it, haven't you?
Yeah, I can do it, but I don't really want to do it.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't really want to. Okay, so we got Mekong Farong says the juice ruined Marvel, and when he says juice, he means Jews. That's kind of
yeah, I know.
but Mekong, the Jews created Marvel.
Yeah.
They created Marvel. So you're kind of going out on a limb to say the Jews ruined it. I mean, maybe there's some truth to that, but it's beyond that now, because the Jews created Marvel, man. Kirby and Lee. Well, I'd say Kirby and Lee, and then Ditko. Those three, and actually, if you removed Lee, Kirby and Ditko could have made Marvel. And Lee gets a way more.
But because I think Lee's way with words is what made people stay.
Yes.
But I think Kirby and Ditko's ability to create worlds and characters was what sucked people in.
Well, you have to remember, I mean, and again, okay, we're kind of going on a side note here, but it's still within comics, is that back in the 60s, Marvel was just starting to get into superhero comics. They were doing monster comics before that. They gave superheroes a shot. When the comics code came in, it started to fall apart. They tried to get into monsters and horror. It was actually horror that brought the comics code in. But when Kirby and Ditko were there to start the comic book the superhero revolution again in comics in the 60s, in the early 60s, early mid 60s, that tore it. That blew it wide open. Those two artists are what made Marvel become what Marvel is today. And it's unfortunate they don't get enough credit. But, I guess that's Jews against Jews. What can you do?
Yeah. What can you do?
Let me just do a couple more and then we'll continue, because I want to get some more. I want to get a little bit more into Endgame before we. Rico says it makes no sense that Flash Gordon is an Indian guy.
Wait, see? Is that a joke?
Maybe he's confusing Flash Gordon with Freddie Mercury.
No. He's confusing him for Flash Thompson from the Spider-Man movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because Flash Thompson was an Indian guy, yes. Yes, I thought that was really, like, that's the thing, like, okay, Spider-Man Homecoming was a good movie, but the casting they did, specifically for diversity, it just feels so wrong and obvious. Like, if I was an Indian guy, I'd be upset.
Yeah.
But why did you do that? Because, look, this is why I'm saying, like, men don't care about representation.
No.
Women do. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm a Puerto Rican dude. I read comics from the time that I was about 6 or 7 years old until I was like 14, 15. And then I stopped and I got back into it when I was like 26. And I can tell you, I never scoured through the books going, where's the Puerto Rican superhero? I didn't care. I didn't even like think of it that way. That's an alien idea to me. Yeah. I mean, my comic for Comicsgate is about a white woman. That's my central character. I don't care about representation. I want like good stories. That's it. And so like this thing with Flash Thompson being an Indian guy and MJ isn't. Not only does MJ not even stand for Mary Jane, it's a random nickname that doesn't actually apply to the girl. But the girl is like a mulatto girl. And Peter Parker's original date was like a black chick. Yeah. And like the black chick had a white father and like a black mom, even though that black chick doesn't look mixed. I mean, they were just all over the place with diversity. And it was so obvious that they were doing it. I was like, what is the point of this? Like, I don't even care about these kids. Like, what are you trying? It's like, I'm sorry, you're still reading comments.
No, go ahead.
Suffice to say, I agree that is random. And I think that Indian boys should be annoyed with that if they know that Flash Thompson was obviously a white guy. Like, why are you even doing this? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so, you know what's really interesting? I'll tell you what's really interesting. One thing they don't change the race or gender of are villains. You ever notice that?
Very
true.
They don't
fuck with that.
Very true, man.
They leave them white guys if they can.
Yeah.
If they're white guys, they stay white guys. Like the Vulture, white guy.
Yeah.
Mysterio is going to be a white guy. Ego was a white guy. Thanos played by a white guy. Like they're that's okay. The villains, that's fine, unless because there is Killmonger who is a black guy, but. The exception being, though, if it is a change, and this isn't just the MCU, this is just Hollywood now, like across the board. The only time it's not acceptable or the only time if you do cast an antagonist as a non-white or non-male or mixture of both, but mostly if it's non-male, usually like male bad guys are okay regardless of race. Do change it, then what they do is they tell this tragic story to make the characters almost like you're rooting for them.
Yeah.
Or they're not really evil because of some personal choice, because of greed or corruption, or just because they're sadistic or evil, but because something forced their hand, or something is out of their control, or they're the real victims, or maybe they even have a good idea. Like Killmonger in Black Panther is a black guy, and when that movie's over, they want you to root for him by the time it ends. Mm-hmm. People who did, they were like, Killmonger was right. I was like, no, he wasn't. He was a genocidal maniac. But the way the movie spun it, they tried to make you think that. And it was like, this is what they do. And this is what I'm talking about. It makes everything really predictable. Because you know how things are going to pan out because you know where their politics are at. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. You can go ahead and go back to the comics.
No, you're absolutely right. All right, I'll go back to the comics. No, that's a good point, man. That's a very good point. There's a couple. I'm gonna mention the comments that are comic related, guys. The other one was about Shazam. Shazam was good.
Yeah, I never saw it. I heard it was good though. I heard it was very good actually.
I saw it. I'm gonna say that it was good. I wouldn't say it was a great movie, but it was good. It was a good DC. It was a very welcomed change from fucking Justice League, man.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it was a wonderful welcome change, and Shazam's a good character. It's a good character, and they didn't. But I will say this, and I'll spoil this movie for you if you don't mind. at the end of the movie, they had the whole Shazam family. Like they didn't even wait for that. They just ended the movie, bang, everybody that he knows in his adopted family group becomes Shazam characters. And
Ugh.
and do you think they were all white?
No.
No.
I know they were in the comics.
They were in the
But-
comics. Yeah.
I know they were in the comics, but that's not acceptable.
No, not a chance. Asian woman, black woman. Well, she's actually the actress was obviously mulatto. But yeah. Anyway, yes, the same thing. No, you cannot have all white. Are you kidding me? One more comment, and then I want to move on more into Endgame as well. So get ready.
Okay.
Get ready for spoilers, motherfuckers. Where was it? Shit, now I lost the comment. This is the problem with not having super chats. All right, well, fuck you guys. I can't find your comments. Let's keep going.
Okay.
Well, one of the reasons I don't want super chats is because you're forced to read them.
Yeah, I understand. I understand.
Anyway, so getting back into Endgame, and I want to, it's gonna be spoilers, guys. So if you don't like it, then you're gonna have to mute the live stream and come back later after you've seen it. And I want to. There's a couple points I want to bring up, and one of them. Let's go back to what you said, Brian, about Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple moments in the movie of Captain America I want to bring up. And this will also lead into some more of the culture wars, obviously, that appeared in that movie. The one moment I'm thinking of is Captain America fought himself.
Yeah.
Right? Good moment. I think that was a Russo moment. You think?
Yeah. I know. I do. I think that because look, I think the Russos, like, they really like Captain America.
Yeah.
I think they really do. I mean, you can see it because they directed 2 of the Captain America films.
Yep.
And I think that they're big fans of the character. And I'll tell you this too. I think the Russos are secretly, if not overtly, but I think secretly, they're libertarians. I think it's in politics because if you watch Civil War and you watch Winter Soldier, especially those 2 films, at the core of them, Captain America's values are towards freedom, away from authoritarianism, away from government control.
Yep.
He's all about that. Like in the first movie, it's all about, like, SHIELD is trying to protect the world, and so they have all the security and stuff. And one could say it's kind of anti, government surveillance and all that. But Captain America doesn't limit it to that. He is against the overreach of government and the restrictions on individual freedom.
Oh, yeah.
But it really comes out in Captain America: Civil War. And there are actually angry feminists and leftist journalists that were complaining about it. They actually called Captain America a libertarian douchebag in that movie, even though he turned out to be absolutely right. But there was a point where the UN, the United Nations, are the ones that want the superheroes, the Avengers, to sign the accords, right?
Yep.
To basically say you can only go into places that the government, if the United Nations says you can go to places, and that we will be the ones that will essentially be monitoring what you guys are doing. Now, Tony Stark, he sides with them for emotional reasons, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's emotional reasons. Like, there's a woman who emotionally
and that's
gets to
Tony
him.
Stark. That's Tony Stark.
Yeah,
and that's
and that is him. But we needed a conflict, so they created that so that he would have a reason that makes sense. But I think the Russos, at their heart, they disagree with it because Cap, he criticizes the United Nations. And I'm telling you, if there's one group you're not supposed to criticize, it's the United Nations, despite the fact that most people don't like them.
No.
I mean, I think that if they know anything about them, you don't like them. I mean, they're supposed to be the group of people that cares about human rights all over the world. And who's on the board there?
Yeah.
Like, who controls things in the United Nations? And so there is a point where, when they're discussing it, I think Rhodey, who is a government agent and a government employee himself, he says, look, this isn't like the World Council, which is like this secret clandestine group they made up for the movies. He says, this isn't just that. This is the United Nations. He actually puts the UN above this secret clandestine sort of, organization that monitors where S.H.I.E.L.D. goes and what they do. He says, this is bigger than that. This is the UN. And Captain America says, yeah. And they all have agendas.
Yes.
And they want to tell us where we can go and what we can do. And I don't want to do that. I think that it's the best hands are in ours. You see, so that's why I believe the Russos are actually probably they're politically libertarian, and they're probably liberals, like they're okay with
which is
gays and whatever, but but politically they're libertarians, I think.
Which would be a rarity in Hollywood, and
absolutely.
And I want to add on to that by bringing up a couple more Captain America points in the movie. I mentioned the fighting Captain America fighting himself, and the other one was right before that. They played on again. This is a Russo moment. I'm telling you. They right before that fight went down, they played on the one talking point in the comics where SJWs tried to turn Captain America into a Hydra agent.
Mm-hmm.
It was a story.
When he did the Hail Hydra thing. Yeah.
Which pissed off a lot of people, right? And so
it's antithetical to the character. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But the Russos did an incredible job in that movie by using the whole time travel thing to go, well, he already knows they're Hydra. Now he's going to use that line to actually push the story forward without him obviously being a part of the shitty storyline that someone like Mark Waid might have written in the modern age. It was incredible, I thought.
Yeah, I can't remember the guy who actually wrote that story in the comics, but I do remember him feeling very strongly, his politics very strongly, and he was legit. Like he said, he really understood politics like nobody else, but he was vehemently anti-American.
Yeah,
when he wrote those books, not just anti-Cap, anti-America.
Absolutely. And I mean, it fell apart really fast. I mean, they had their whole retcon the whole fucking thing in the comics. But I thought that was quite brilliant by the Russos, and I thought that definitely was a moment. And the other one I wanted to quickly bring up was the wide shot at the end with a broken shield and a hammer against everyone.
Yep.
You remember that?
Absolutely. Hell yeah. Yeah. Captain America picking up the hammer, another Russo moment. For most of the movie is Russo stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that there was definitely producer and executive interference. There were people telling them what they should do, and I think that those parts are actually the weakest parts of that movie.
Oh, yeah.
And it keeps it from being what I think could have been a perfect film.
And
for a Marvel film anyway.
And before we came on, you said you were gonna tell me and explain exactly what happened there, what those moments were.
Oh, yeah. I can tell you, okay, so I'll tell you why I think it happened, and I'll use another movie as an example to explain.
Okay.
We don't know for sure because I don't think the Russos will ever come out and say this, at least not now.
They can't.
Although they have announced, yeah, they probably can't, but they have announced, by the way, that after this movie, now that Endgame is out, the Russo brothers are no longer making Marvel movies.
Of course.
So this would tell me that there was some disagreement or issue with the studio, and they're like, okay, well, we're done after this. And so they're going to go do their own thing now.
Yep.
So I think that doesn't prove anything, but I think that it should be taken into consideration. So now I'll explain why I think this. So back in 2002, there was this movie that came out directed by Sam Raimi, you may have heard of, called Spider-Man.
Yep.
And this was the one with Tobey Maguire and the Green Goblin. I forget who plays. I always forget his name, but I love him as an actor.
Yeah. What's his name?
So, yeah, Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe. Yep.
Willem Dafoe. So that was a huge success. Probably the best superhero movie of the time so far.
Until the second one.
Yeah, until Spider-Man 2. Now, Spider-Man 2 was a massive success, and it was an amazing movie. It still holds up today. Spider-Man 2 is great.
Yep.
Okay? So after the success of Spider-Man 2, I remember this because I was following what was going on with this. Sam Raimi, the director, was interviewed. And there were all this buzz around Spider-Man 2 and how much money it was making, how big of a hit it was, okay?
Yeah.
They were asking him what he's going to do for Spider-Man 3. They were already talking about Spider-Man 3. And one person, I don't know if they were journalists, I think it was a journalist for something, but I don't remember, it was a long time ago, said, are you going to put Venom in Spider-Man 3? They wanted to know if Venom was going to be in Spider-Man 3. The Venom is the character that actually did end up getting into Spider-Man 3, but here's what's interesting. In that interview, which was shortly after Spider-Man 2 came out, Sam Raimi said he had no interest in doing Venom as a character in any of his movies. Mm-hmm. And when asked why, Sam Raimi said, in my opinion, Venom is not a Spider-Man villain in the classic sense. He says, I'm thinking about the books that I grew up with when I was little, and I have a better understanding of. Mm-hmm. So those comics, I'm looking at the original Spider-Man Rogues Gallery before it got expanded on later on.
Lee Kirby and Ditko.
What?
Lee Kirby and Ditko.
Yeah, like those guys back then. Mm-hmm. So characters like Electro and the Rhino and the Scorpion and Sandman and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the characters he was looking at. Those were the Rogues Gallery figures, not Venom. Venom came out in the 90s. I mean, it's a good character, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't part of Sam Raimi's vision. So fast forward, Spider-Man 3 is coming out, and there's Venom. So what happened? Well, it came out later, but I guessed it at the time. I said the studio got to him and they told him he had to put Venom in the movie. And the reason why they told him that he had to put Venom in the movie was because some fucking asshole at that company thought that Venom would sell more tickets because they thought that he was more cool with the kids at the time.
Right.
Now, he was cool in the 90s, but remember, we were into the 2000s at this point, and people were just fine with Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus in the first two movies.
And people didn't really know, anybody in the 2000s didn't know who the fuck Venom was, man, if they were fucking younger people.
If they were really young, maybe, yeah, but like people like me, I knew who Venom was, but I agreed with Sam Raimi when he said, I don't want to do Venom. I was like, you know what? You're the director, and you've given us great products so far. So I'm of the opinion that you should be left to do whatever you want.
Yep. Because
it's going to be good, right? He did really good with Spider-Man 2. It's going to be good. So the studio forced his hand, and they said, you got to put Venom in the movie. And I think that as a result of that, Sam Raimi got pissed, and he said, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to phone this whole fucking movie in. And sure enough, Spider-Man 3 turned out to be what it is. Which is the weakest of all the movies, because I think that he just said, fuck it, I'm not doing any more Spider-Man movies, because he didn't make any more after that, even though Spider-Man 3 did make a lot of money, and it was a shit movie compared to the other two, because he phoned it in. And I think that with the Russos, you can see the same track record. They did Captain America Winter Soldier, which was amazing. Mm-hmm. They did Captain America Civil War, which was just as good, if not better. Mm-hmm. And then they went on to do, they were so good with those, okay, that they stopped using Joss Whedon to make Avengers movies. Yeah. They gave it to Russos to do Infinity War and Endgame. Yeah. And so they did Infinity War and knocked it out of the park. And then Endgame comes out, and I think because Kevin Feige and the producers over at Marvel Studios, some producers and some writers and directors, they've been moving in this woke direction lately. They basically said to the Russos, and again, if you look at the track record, you can see it, you have to put some of our shit in these books. Now, in this movie. And look, this has actually gone back to the beginning. Since the beginning, no director that made a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie has had 100% autonomy, because they had to connect their movie to the larger narrative, right? Yeah. So every movie had to have something that relates to their big, you could say, meta narrative. Like it has to lead up to, in some way, either another movie in the cinematic universe or the Infinity Stones or Thanos or the Gauntlet or something. So you got to have something there. Yeah. And so every director had to do that, but most of them were allowed a reasonable amount of freedom to do it. Or they even went with it and said, okay, I'll roll with this and I'll make it work, like James Gunn did with the Guardians of the Galaxy. He said, all right, yeah, I can do this. But then other directors like Edgar Wright, who was supposed to direct the original Ant-Man movie, he wanted 100% freedom. He wanted 100% freedom, and Kevin Feige was like, "No, you have to tie this back to something in our cinematic universe because we're telling a bigger story, and you're basically engaging in a collaborative effort." And Edgar Wright said, "No, fuck off, I'm not doing it," and he left the project, so they got somebody else. And so, like, you can see how this has panned out. And I think that because the Russos were essentially ending the entire saga, they were ending all these movies. There was a lot more executive and studio influence that was telling them to do certain things, and they had to do it. And I think that that's why we ended up with what we ended up with, which I think despite that, they did a good job. Like, I don't want to like shit on Endgame too much. I thought it was a good movie overall, but there are parts of it that are just cringeworthily bad. Well, and I know that that's not what they would have done if they had been given autonomy.
Well, let me give you one example that I saw so clearly in Endgame that I thought was the Russos basically had a gun to their head. All right, and it did happen in the movie, man. You're absolutely right. And I'm going to give you this, and I want to get your opinion on it. In the first act of the movie, there was a scene with Captain America in a support group.
Yep.
And guess who was starring as one of the characters with main lines?
One of the Russos.
Yeah, one of the Russos. Now, here's a Russo with a gun to his head. Now, do you remember what the dialogue was? Or the monologue?
I can tell you exactly what it was. I'm getting a lot of noise from Lamprey's end, though. Are you like...
Sorry.
Lamprey, smoke your joint away from the mic.
Yeah, I don't know if you're like snorting coke or what. What's going on?
What do you hear?
We hear someone snorting coke.
Inhaling like coke? I don't know.
That's what we heard last time.
Heavy breathing? Are you like...
Oh, Christ.
Whoa.
All right. Anyway.
All right, so I'll tell you what it was. And I'll tell you why. I know that was one of those moments, absolutely, and I'll tell you why. Because they're, this should have been on the cutting room floor, editing wise. So what it was Captain America was heading up a support group, which is something that Falcon used to do. They sort of like established that in the Winter Soldier. It's what Falcon was doing. It's how he met Captain America.
Totally Russo, that right there.
Yeah, that was a good idea that they did that.
Yeah.
So because Cap is doing the thing that Falcon used to do now that Falcon is gone, right?
Yes.
Makes sense.
Beautiful.
The support group, though, had nothing to do with veterans, which is what it was about before. It was all these like vets that had PTSD, and they're kind of like trying to get integrated into the real world now, and it makes perfect sense in the context of a Captain America story because he's also a military veteran, right? So, but in this case, these guys were recovered. I guess they're talking about their feelings after the snap.
Yes.
And there's this one guy who's talking about, how he tried to get back out there and he went on a date with another man. And so basically it was about a gay relationship.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, I know why this is for sure not the work of what the Russos would normally have done. Number one, Kevin Feige himself had talked about how, they're going to be looking at more LGBTQ representation in these movies, and I think that was meant to be a teaser for that. Yep. Number two is and it's a very slow part of the movie that obviously doesn't have to be there, or at the very least doesn't have to be that long, and also did not have to be about a gay relationship. The odds of that are staggeringly small. Okay, but more to the point, right after that scene is over, there's a scene that actually is the catalyst scene for the plot of the entire movie, which is Ant-Man coming back from the quantum realm.
Yes.
So how does Ant-Man come back from the quantum realm? How does it happen?
It's a rat presses on some buttons.
Yeah, a rat happens to be inside the truck where the device was at, happens to step on the right button, and it happens to spit Ant-Man out. Yep. Now, I saw that, and I was like, what the fuck just happened? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it's like, okay, look, is it plausible? Yeah, I guess it could happen, but it seems so weird to do. And here's what I think. I think the Russos had a different idea as to how Ant-Man could come back.
Right.
And this is what I propose could have been the best way that Ant-Man could have come back. His friend, Raul, I think his name was,
yes,
who was in the Ant-Man movie, the Hispanic guy.
And never appeared in this movie.
No, he never showed up. He didn't get dusted, which is, like, you could do that. I don't think he should be. He finds Ant-Man's truck because he knows where they are,
Yep.
right? Or they took it away and he like goes and looks for it or something.
Yep.
He lets him out, and then when Ant-Man gets out, Ant-Man goes, "Where have I been?" And Raul's like, "Oh, dude, I'm going to tell you where you've been." And they go into one of those things where Raul tells a story of like how things happened, and it's all very funny. They could have done that. That would have been perfect.
Cutting room floor, man. I bet you.
Yeah, and it would have been done. It would have been handled. I think that would have been handled beautifully and perfectly, but they didn't do that. Instead, they just had a rat do it, and they had this weird gay confession scene that just didn't have to be there, and it just made things slow.
And the most cryptic thing about that is that they put a gun to one of the Russo brothers' head and said, "You are going to say these lines."
Yeah. Well, I mean, he cameos in every movie, and I guess that's the only place where it would have made sense. But again, they said, we need to have a scene. We need to have this. Yeah. And so they had it.
They made him say the lines.
Yeah.
He had to say those fucking lines. I mean, if he could have just put another actor to do it.
Yep.
And made and had a cameo somewhere else.
Yeah, he could have been in the SHIELD headquarters in the 1970s or something.
Exactly.
I know. Absolutely could have done that. Absolutely.
But he said the fucking lines, man.
Had nothing to do, like, again, doesn't bear much on the story. I get, like, that you want to establish how humanity is dealing with this tremendous loss, but that seems like a very strange and sloppy way to handle it. It's just kind of like the casting of Spider-Man Homecoming. Just, if you're not thinking about it too much, if you don't know the comics, it probably doesn't impact you at all. But if you understand the source material, you can't tell me that that's not weird. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's okay to say this is a strange choice.
Well, it's also a film that kids are going to watch, man.
Yeah.
So, okay, why do you have to throw that sodomite shit in there?
That's what I was just going to say. I think this is a bigger objective to expose children to sodomy.
Exactly, and it's very subtle if you're a kid. Like, I'm sitting next to my son, he's 12 years old, and all of a sudden the dialogue comes up. He's like, "Oh yeah, we went on a date and he did this and he did that and the magic pronoun." And I'm like, what the fuck? That's not necessary.
So Rigo Champagne makes a point I want to read out because I want to to it. He says no in response to the whole Raul thing, telling the story. He says the first act has to be morose. Raul would have changed the pace and tone of the first act. Yeah, I get that, except that Ant-Man is immediately funny from the moment he arrives. Mm-hmm. And the fact that a rat opens up the machine is also kind of silly too. So it already tonally is off. They could have placed, I think that you could have made that be, the Raul thing could have been the transition from Act 1 to Act 2.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that would have been the way to handle it. And that's how I would have paced it out. I would have made that the transition, because in Act 2 it does start getting really silly. Yep. Like when you see, the Incredible Soy Hulk, when they show him, yes. Huffalo or Mark Huffalo.
Mark Huffalo, yes.
Yeah, like that again. This has been a thing in the comics in the past. There has been versions of the Hulk that were intelligent and able to talk and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that they did that mainly because they were trying to, in a way, give Bruce and the Hulk some resolution. I kind of don't like that they did it a little like off screen, because you just see it. Yeah. He's just different now, and we're kind of like just expected to just accept that. But it does take a little bit out of the Hulk. It's not a deal breaker though, because it's not unfaithful to the comics, because they have done that in the comics.
Yeah.
So
I heard people complain about it. I'm a big Hulk fan. I've got a lot of Hulk comic books, and I saw all the changes, and I thought, I get it, but you're right. There was no real transition. It just suddenly happened.
Yeah, and then he said, "Oh, here's what I did," and I was like,
Yeah.
"Wow, that sounds like something a scientist would have come up years ago."
Yeah, exactly.
I guess you're not that smart. I don't know, but I mean, like, but the other thing is that it does you still wanted to see Hulk do more, and he didn't really do much when you think about it. Although he did some important things, but he wasn't involved, much in ways that you wanted to see more of. But that's okay, I guess. Hulk gets to shine a lot in the other movies, so one could argue that that's okay.
I want to hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to continue on the vein I was at with as far as guns to head to the brothers.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so that was the first sort of sodomite scene. There was an actual gun to his head saying, "You're gonna read these lines. I'm sorry, brother. You're reading these fucking lines." There was two more. The second one, which again, like you said, no reason whatsoever to even have those lines in those scenes, was when Ant-Man said, "That's America's ass."
Yeah.
What the fuck was that?
I think that was them. That was Ant-Man being more Paul Rudd than being Scott Lang, because I've noticed, if you've ever seen Paul Rudd's other movies,
but do you know how that started? That scene started with Tony Stark going, "Your ass doesn't look good in that suit."
Yes, I know.
What the fuck is that? Anyway,
no, that's an attempt at humor, but it was a bit like weird. It was weird. I don't think normal dudes would comment on that, but
and Tony Stark on Captain America's ass. No, man. I know Tony Stark is funny and sarcastic, but really, and it's not just a one-off comment. That fucking joke carries out through the next couple scenes.
Yeah, Cap says it about his own ass.
I know, man.
I don't really know what that's about.
So it's inserted in the film, and I think like you said, it's very subtle, but it's there, and it's pushing that agenda, and I see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a blinking light to me. I see it 100%. And there was one more I'll mention, was when Ant-Man was on Tony Stark's shoulder. And when they were trying to steal the Tesseract back in the past. And he bends over with his ass up and says, "Flick me."
Yeah, I didn't really catch that one. I wasn't I was watching it in 3D, so some of the bits were a little bit blurry because that's a problem with 3D. But I couldn't get tickets for just a regular showing because it was just fucking sold out. Yeah. So I didn't catch that.
Well, it was there, man, and those are the three that I saw as far as the sodomite agenda goes.
Mm-hmm.
But those are parts. Those are not Russo. That's not Russo.
No. The other, because I gotta go in a little bit myself. You guys,
no, we're good.
So I apologize.
That's
but
fine.
Some of the other stuff I wanted to bring up is the treatment of Thor in this movie. So this is a really big one for me. I already talked a little bit about it, but I'll give you some other issues I had with that. Okay. So when we meet Thor in this film, after he's cut off Thanos' head in the beginning of the movie. Mm-hmm. Spoilers, they kill him right in the beginning, but that's not the end of the story by any stretch. Yep.
Those were the brothers. That was their idea.
Yeah. That was. So 5 years had passed since that, and Thor, in all of his depression, has let himself go completely. He is found drinking and eating carby junk food and hanging out with his alien buddies playing Fortnite online. Basically he turns into a man baby.
Yes.
What they believe a man-child is someone who, hangs out with his roommates in their house. He doesn't bathe. He doesn't shower. He eats junk food all day. He drinks and he plays video games. Yeah. Okay? And they frame it that way with the most masculine character with the largest responsibility of every character because he's a king
and the most powerful.
Yeah, and the most powerful. They tear him down, and he becomes a complete joke. Now, for the first, minute, it's funny. Like when I first saw it, I did chuckle, but then it wore itself out really quickly, and I was like, so why did they do that with this character? And I can give you a comparison. So Thor got, he let himself go. He started drinking. He stopped giving a shit. And he put on a bunch of weight, okay? And he grew out a beard, and he's just a mess. Just an absolute mess. In Thor Ragnarok, though, so I'm going to go back to that, we meet Valkyrie. Now, Valkyrie had started drinking and throwing her life away when she lost the battle against Hela, which takes place thousands of years before we meet her. But is she fat and slovenly and a loser, or is she like a thin, attractive, badass bounty hunter that also just happens to be drunk all the time?
Yes.
There's a very stark difference in how they handle loss. And has Valkyrie lost nearly as much as Thor has lost? If you watch all the films, he loses his mother, he loses his father, he loses his brother multiple times, he loses his country or his realm, he loses
half of his people,
and then he loses half his people again because Thanos does the snap. So half of what's left gets lost. He loses his best friend Heimdall. He loses the Warriors 3. He loses his sister. Yep. He loses more than everybody.
Yeah.
More than everybody else. And he is expected, which I think is what makes him admirable, to carry the weight of all of that loss and still carry on and still do the right thing for his people, which is what we would expect of him. Yes. And up until Infinity War, like the Infinity War's ending, he is doing that. He goes to the place to get the axe made. He helps the dwarf. He risks his life. He puts himself in the rays of a star. Yep. He does all of that because he wants to do the right thing despite everything else. And so when we see him in Endgame and he's just like this fat slob that plays video games, I'm like, what happened to all of those admirable qualities? I know that it's a lot to lose, but this seems like a really silly way to then, I guess you could say, follow up on that.
Not Russo's.
Okay? No, I don't think Fat Thor was a Russo thing. And then I'll point another thing out that happens that I think is even more interesting, and you should know about this. This is where the feminist shit comes in, and there's a lot of feminist shit in this movie.
Yeah.
So they devise a plan to go back in time to various points in time to recover the Infinity Stones. They can make a new gauntlet and bring everybody back, okay? And so Thor and Rocket Raccoon have to go back to Asgard during the time of Thor: The Dark World.
Yes.
I watched the other day because I wanted to watch the movies again to make sure I was right about the thing that I saw in terms of his arc and how it shifts. And so in Thor: The Dark World, Natalie Portman has the one stone inside of her, the ether, and Rocket Raccoon finds a syringe to get the ether out. Okay, we're not going to go into how silly that is because
yes.
It's silly because in the movie no one could get it out. Like Odin wouldn't have thought to do that, really. Yeah. But you know what? We're gonna leave that alone. Whatever. No, I'm not gonna overthink that part. But they go there to do that, and here's what happens. While Thor is there, and he's like a fat slob, he runs into his mother, Frigga, and Frigga. You can tell that she knows what's up because she's a goddess. I get that.
Yep.
But she gives him a pep talk. And it changes him. For the rest of the movie, he now has the confidence to go on. So she actually says a few words to him, and it drives him towards trying to do better. I don't have a problem with that in principle because I do think that having a mother and a father, there are benefits to both. However, what is interesting to me is that what Frigga gives Thor as advice is contradictory to what Odin had been giving him as advice the entire time.
Yes! Yes.
So it contradicts that absolutely. So Odin has been essentially teaching Thor to be a good man, That's basically been from the beginning. He was like, I want you to be a good king, but you need to learn humility. You need to learn all of these qualities, okay? And so in the first Thor movie, it's all about that. It's all about Thor learning to be worthy of carrying the hammer. But ultimately, that's about being a good man, understanding that with all of the power you have as a god of thunder, there must also come all the responsibility. That there is no such thing as power without responsibility. This is not a catchphrase. This is a real value. It's a real thing, okay? So Odin teaches Thor this lesson. That's what the first movie's all about. The second film, The Dark World, is all about the Thor that has learned that and how he is essentially exercising that maturity that he's got to make decisions and take risks that his father wouldn't take. So it's almost like becoming the father is what the second movie is about. Yeah. Because Odin is his wife, and he becomes emotional. And he's basically like prepared to sacrifice as many Asgardians as it takes to take out the Dark Elves. And Thor says, this is not the right way to do it. I'm going to do it my way. And I know I'm going to put myself, this is the highest order of treason. It's going to get me in trouble with my father, but I know I'm doing the right thing, so I'm going to do it anyway. And he does.
Yep.
So you find that this is the trajectory the character is taking. He's becoming more of a kingly figure than his father was. That's all about the ascension of that, okay? Yep. And Thor Ragnarok, I think it departs a little bit from that, so I won't go into it. I think it's because change of directors, and also the tone was starting to shift at that point.
Well, Thor Ragnarok and Waititi was like, okay, yeah, I'll fucking do whatever you say. Here's a dick, I'll suck it.
Yeah. But there were some things that Thor does continue to show in his maturity, although they did start making him more of a dope in that movie. But one was that he was willing to, again, do the right thing as the leader of the Asgardian people, was to rescue them and prioritize their lives over his own. This is all noble stuff. Yep. However, his mother in this movie says, instead of trying to find out ways in which you should be like, the person that you think you are supposed to be, essentially trying to become the man that other people expect you to be or that other people are asking you to be, maybe you should just be the person that you are. So this is a very feminine way of doing things. It's essentially saying, abandon your responsibility because it's clearly not comfortable and just be you. Whatever that is, right? And that doesn't need to be defined. And that's what he does. And so she completely contradicts Odin's wisdom, and he just does whatever. And at the end of the movie, you see it because what does he do? He gives what's left of Asgard
to a mulatto woman.
Yeah, he basically makes her queen, which I guess you could just do that, and he goes on a ship with the Guardians. And what are the Guardians? They're a bunch of losers. They're a bunch of losers. And I mean, I like those movies, but they themselves have said that. They're a bunch of random, just traveling pirates. They don't have, they don't have responsibility. They do what they want. They're vagabonds.
They took the king of Asgard and reduced him to a space pirate through the horrible advice of his dead mother.
Mm-hmm.
In 5 minutes of film.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and that's why I thought the treatment of Thor in that movie was terrible. It really upset me to no end that they would do that. And he was still fat at the end.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, well, I know that I guess Chris Hemsworth is supposed to play Thor in another movie. I guess he's going to be in the next Guardians probably. But I don't see how that's going to... I don't see what they're going to do with that. Like, literally, you're taking a god and putting him on a ship with a bunch of normies. Like, how are you going to make an interesting story out of that?
No, it's done. It's done.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. So there is that. So,
guys, I hate to interject, but I gotta go to sleep. I got work in the morning.
Okay, go ahead.
It was a great chat. I wish I knew more about comic books. I know absolutely nothing about it, but it was a really cool insight on what's happening with the culture wars within the fiction and novels of comic books.
Yeah, well, this stuff, like I said, it's not just comics. It's basically like, it's people with agendas, and they're cramming their shit into everything they can. And yes, sometimes it's subtle, but usually these days it's very overt. And I think that it needs to be called out. So this is the reason, because look, kids are going to watch these movies.
Yep.
So
what you're
saying is that Thor's going to be a mulatto tranny. In the near future.
Who knows?
Disabled, probably.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Brian, I hope you come back on very soon, and I'll give you a buzz tomorrow or Tuesday.
Okay, man. Take it easy.
All right. Good night, guys.
All right. So we'll sign off here, Brian. And the last thing I just wanted to point on, just a minute or two here, is the fact that we have been talking recently about Endgame. Brian made some great points about the politics, the culture wars. Sorry, that's being presented in the media today, especially with this latest movie, and we spoiled the hell out of it for you all. But the last thing I want to say is this, and if we
only spoiled the parts that sucked. All the cool shit.
Yeah, the cool.
We didn't talk about it at all.
You're absolutely right. I never thought about that. We just spoiled the shitty stuff.
Yeah, so don't worry about it. And I'll tell you again, I would say it's 80% fantastic and 20% absolute garbage.
Yes.
So that's what I would say about it.
Well, and when you say 80 to 20, I would say 80% was the Russos' original idea, and 20% was shoved down their throats by the high-level producers.
Kevin Feige probably, because he's the one who's been doing the virtue signaling lately. And also they have a bunch of SJW actors too. Mark Ruffalo is probably the most annoying dude on Twitter.
That guy's horrible.
Yeah, he is.
Well, it's not only that, but the people that are putting guns to the heads of these people, they're the ones with the casting couches.
Yeah.
That's who they are. They're the ones that force black actors to stick their fingers up their ass and then sniff it on the red carpet.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned that in the last. And the one thing I want to do before we finish this is I want to say this. Captain Marvel, as a character, whether you followed it through the series of comic books that were created by two Jews or not, did not belong in this movie, or didn't deserve a movie in between these two movies, and the only reason it exists is because of the narrative we're talking about.
Yep.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I think that a Captain Marvel movie could have been done, and it could have been done well, but not in current year Hollywood. There's no way. And I would say that Black Panther was also, it's the weakest movie that I've seen in the MCU.
Absolutely.
And it's because it's too woke, and it did not to me was like not nearly. I'll explain why in one simple statement that I've been making ever since I saw the Black Panther movie. When I heard it was coming out, I was hyped when they announced it, because I love that character. I've always loved Black Panther. I thought he looked fucking awesome, and I thought it was a cool concept. Okay, when I saw him in Civil War, he was badass. He was like a fucking cat ninja Terminator. He was badass in that movie.
Yeah, and his dad died, and he wanted to kill fucking Captain America.
The way that he fought, and now like he was just chasing down the Winter Soldier in the streets, and then they get in a fight on the rooftop, and I mean you can tell he's just great. Okay, when his own movie comes out, he is less interesting in his own movie than he was in when he had that small role in that other movie. Like I said, how is it Black Panther is more badass in somebody else's movie than he was in his movie? And one of the main reasons was because Ryan Coogler and the writers behind it, they didn't want to make a superhero movie. They wanted to make a movie that was going to inspire black activism. That's for absolute sure. There was interviews with him and the writers talking about how important it was for them to make a statement on race, and where they could have told a story, but they didn't. They did enough to like make their point, and also their focus on diversity actually put Black Panther in a smaller spotlight than some of the black women in that movie end up getting more screen time than he does, and he doesn't do anything, and they make the villain sympathetic and not only sympathetic but morally correct. This is the reason why that movie turned out to be shit. And when I heard that Captain Marvel was coming out after this, I was like, oh shit, is Captain Marvel going to be worse? I think it's going to be worse. And sure enough, it was worse. Yeah. But Black Panther, don't get it twisted, I did buy it because I wanted to have all of the movies, but it is the weakest one that I've seen. And if I saw Captain Marvel, I'd say that's probably the weakest one because I heard enough about it. Yeah, indubitably. So
and I was going to say, you still buy movies?
I do because I do. If I like it, I want to support the people who make it and let them know, hey, I like what you're doing. I'm going to buy this. Also, I don't like getting digital copies because I want to have like a physical copy in my hand, because then I know I can use it, like I can watch it wherever, I can bring it to a friend's house, and I have it, because like people who like use streaming services to buy movies, I think that's dumb, because those streaming services are not going to be there forever, and True. When they eventually go out of business, you're just going to be, I don't think you're going to be able to access that content. So
no, very true, very true. I'm more of the person that came from Southeast Asia 15 years ago, and when I was there, everything was free. It's all pirated.
Yeah, yeah, sure, I gotcha. I mean, I download some stuff, but mostly I try to support. Like what I'll do, like for Endgame, is I might like go find it on the internet when a good copy comes out, but when it comes out on Blu-ray, I'll go buy it. So because I liked it overall, that was good.
No, that's good. Yeah, support what you like, and by the way, guys, support my guest Brian Martinez. You've been looking at his artwork the whole time we've been talking, so go support him. All I did, Brian, was I put up your Honey Badger links. I didn't put up anything else. You have something else?
I have my own YouTube channel, so I'll make a comment under my actual YouTube channel, or under my actual name.
Well, send it to me on Skype there, and I can throw that up too.
If you want, what I do is every Monday through Friday, I stream for 1 hour from noon to 1 of me drawing, because I work on.
I didn't know that.
Of me working on my comics. So I have 2 books I'm working on. One is called Englewood, and it's being written by Micah Curtis. It's his project. I'm just the artist on it, and I usually work on Englewood on my streams. I'm also working on a book called Bombshell, which is my idea. Bombshell is a book that I'm doing with traditional style with pencils and ink and stuff, so that one's not on streams usually, so I work on it here at my desk. And I also take, I have days where I take requests, so people can send me money and they make a request and I'll draw it for them, or I'll just do painting, like I'm practicing on stuff and whatnot. So yeah, it's on my channel where I dropped a comment, so all right, I'll give you a link after.
Send it to me. I don't see it. This is a comment, Brian Martinez. Where's the link?
Hold on. I'll get it. Let me just go to my channel. I think my channel is one of those. Yeah, it's like a bunch of fucking letters.
Well, Micah Curtis, I'm subscribed to that guy. I didn't know you were working with him.
Yeah, he's writing the book. Yeah,
beautiful.
I think if you go to his Twitter name is actually Micah Curtis is writing Englewood.
Oh, so, okay. Well, no, I'm banned from Twitter.
Oh, okay, sure.
Lifetime ban.
Ah, well.
I'm a lifetime ban.
I'll put a link in here too, but I'm afraid it's all like nutty. But yeah, give me a sub if you want. I do, like I said, streams. I do them every day for 1 hour from 12 to 1. I try to be really consistent unless I have like a doctor's appointment or something. And I try to do them every day. And I have lots and lots of, and I don't just draw. Usually I draw while I'm like ranting about shit going on in the world, or something that I see, or I talk about art with people or whatever. But you can see I have lots and lots and lots of videos.
Well, that's great. I put the link up to your channel. I never had that before, and I do recommend you guys go check out his stuff. He is the face of Honey Badgers. Are you the face of Honey Badgers?
Well, I mean, technically, I think people still probably think of like Karen Strawn and Allison Tiemann. But as far as like, if you go to the channel I operate out of is actually called Badger Live Streams.
Yeah, it's up there. I got that one.
My content. Okay. But yeah, those are the shows that I mostly manage those, and I'm usually the one hosting them. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to remember, guys, you have to understand, Brian, and you know this, as most of my listeners are MGTOW.
Yeah. Fine.
Yeah. And you have to understand that Brian still has to deal with women. He still has to do it. They
pay me, so
yeah, they pay him. So that's fantastic. But you have to understand, he still has to deal with women, and that'll always be a part of his internet personality. However,
yeah.
Keep in mind that he's an intelligent man. He's a great artist, and I want you guys to go and look at his stuff, because you know what, Brian, I didn't even know that you had that other channel.
Oh, that's okay. I guess I didn't really promote it very well, but I got like 1,700 subs or something. So
really?
I guess I'm on my way up. I don't know. I think so. I don't know.
That's great.
I could use more. So yeah, considering all I do is stream art, I guess that does work.
No, that's fantastic. This guy's a great artist, man. I've been showing his stuff all night. So go check it out. And remember this, Brian is creating artwork for projects that are not corrupted by, what did you call it? Cultural bullshit?
Yeah. Terrorists. Cultural terrorists.
Yeah, cultural terrorism. He's not a part of that shit. We never got into other people that do it, but hey, here's one. Check it out, and thank you for coming on, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yep. Love you, man.
All right.
Take it easy. Hope you are successful.
Well, thank you very much. I hope so too.
Have a good night.
I want to change comics and change the culture.
Oh, absolutely. All right, see you, man.
All right, see you, man.